friends. Welcome back to the next session on operations planning, scheduling, and control. Now let's begin with our learning. In this particular session, we'll be understanding and dealing with the concept of bottleneck resource management. The learning objectives. At the end of this particular session, the learners will be able to understand what do we mean by the bottleneck resource management, what are the various roles of operational planning that have been undertaken in terms of bottleneck resource management, and describe how bottleneck management resources is essentially undertaken and implemented in the business organization. Now let us understand what do we mean by the bottleneck resource management. So a bottleneck resource, as the name signifies or it understands, that is an impediment to a process that is a smooth flow activity. So in a business organization, when various activities have been undertaken, there are series of activities or there are sequence of activities which can be conducted one after another. And when the activities have been conducted one after another, certain activity may be completed within this specific time period and certain activities may not be completed within this specific time period. So in a case or in a certain scenario, when the activities are not being conducted within this specific time period and there is no smooth flow or functioning of the activities, then here in this case we can say that if a certain problem arises, that particular problem or a difficulty is being called as a part of a bottleneck. The machine, the testing equipments, the ovens, the paint shop, and the other resources are the example of resources wherein the bottleneck situation can arise. So these are the various resource management concerns wherein the bottlenecks needs to be observed in a very effective way, and the efficient and optimum utilization of those resources are essentially important. So in an organization, these are the various examples with respect to machine, test equipment, ovens, paint shops, and others so on are the resources in which the bottleneck may arise. Each resource has its own processing capacity, and in processing with diverse resources, each capacity is likely to be unique. So depending on each type of resources, their performance, their capacity, their work order consideration, everything is completely different, and based on those consideration we can easily identify as to whether the resources can be managed effectively or whether those particular resources cannot be managed effectively. So if these particular resources are not being managed effectively, then in this case we can say or we can identify that there is an involvement or the capability of bottleneck into existence, and accordingly the resource management is not effective. Now let us understand the procedure or activities that have been performed in terms of identification of a certain bottleneck. So standard process for cleaning a teeth. Now here in this particular example, we are understanding that how do we apply a certain procedure for cleaning the teeth, and cleaning and examining the x-rays can happen simultaneously. So in this case, if you visit a particular doctor, that is a particular dentist, and you have certain consideration as for the cleaning of teeth, then certain process or activity that can be conducted in terms of bottlenecks are: number one, check-in. So here in this case, what happened? You first visit, you take an appointment of a certain doctor, and accordingly, you visit the doctor for the checking or for the regular treatment. So here in this case, around 2 minutes per unit or 2 minutes per teeth can be undertaken, and accordingly, you need to check in with the particular doctor. The doctor, when he observes the particular patient and the teeth are being assessed, he goes to with a certain condition and takes an X-ray. So accordingly, the X-ray machine is you have been passing to the X-ray machine, and accordingly, the photographs has been taken by the respective machines. And hence, again, the 2 minutes per unit time is being scheduled at this particular consideration. The next step that can be identified at here at this stage is developing the X-ray. So once the X-ray machine shoots a particular X-ray, then accordingly the procedure needs to be followed, and accordingly development of an X-ray film needs to be undertaken. So for this particular process or certain activity, the 4 minutes per unit of a certain commodity or quantity is being required, and certain process completed within the specific time period. Now let us understand what decision has to be undertaken. So on the basis of X-ray that has been taken after the 4 minutes duration, you get a certain amount of result. So on the basis of result that have been received, your process of either cleaning starts or your process of X-ray examination starts. So initially, if the doctor feels that there is no problem with the X-rays and he needs to conduct or he needs to start with the cleaning activity, then every cleaning activity has been conducted for 24 minutes per unit, and accordingly the activity commences or it continues. Or in the reverse situation, if the X-ray that has been developed is not effective and it is not good, then again he can send the X-ray for re-examination, and again he wants to assess or he needs to take the different angles and scenario as to the X-ray as a perspective. So here in this case, again, the task of dentist commences and accordingly, the 8 minute per unit activity needs to be conducted with this particular dentist or a particular doctor. So these are the various bottlenecks which may arise in a business organization. And accordingly, the last activity that has been undertaken is the concept of checkout. So in case of a checkout, again, the 6 minute per unit of activity is being undertaken. So here what the consideration as to the 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 4 minutes, 24 or 5 minutes, 8 minutes, and 6 minutes are the series of activities as per the time plan. But in case of developing an X-ray and taking a decision as to cleaning the teeth or X-ray examination is a part of a bottleneck, wherein if a particular X-ray is been developed in a very effective way, or if the machine gives you certain results in the very effective specific time period, then you can say that the bottleneck has been either created or the bottleneck is not been created. So these are the various processes or activities that can be undertaken in order to identify the bottleneck. Now let us understand what are the various good governance practices that can be implemented in an organization to reduce the various bottlenecks. So when a resource capacity is being lowered or equal to the debt of a customer, it is considered to be as a true bottleneck which can be arises. So here we need to understand whether the resources that we are using, that we are deploying, whether they are being deployed in a very effective way, and accordingly it is being provided to a certain customers which is more profitable and which is in demand according to the consumers. So whatever the maximum number of customer demands, if the particular satisfaction or fulfillment of those particular demand is being undertaken, then we can say that there is no involvement of certain bottleneck. But in case if the demand for a certain product increases and according so simultaneously the product that needs to be supplied is not available, then there is a certain situation or scenario wherein a bottleneck may have arisen, and from those particular perspectives only we are not able to deliver the certain product within the specific time period. A genuine bottleneck operates 24 hours a day and 7 days a week, yet still it fails to meet the demand. So, in a certain business organization, it has been observed that the bottleneck it has been conducted 24 by 7. That is the entire day scenario that is for 24 hours and continuously for the 7 days in a particular week, the activity is been conducted and certain products are in demand. So a genuine bottleneck, what does it do? It tries to identify a certain scenario that is maybe at any point or maybe at any second, if a certain problem arises, the bottleneck activity will try to control those particular activities and reduce the operational time lag or the time lead which is into existence and see that the demand that has been desired for a certain product is being met and the machine does not stop its functioning or its operating. A non-bottleneck, on the other hand, has surplus capacity in terms of demand. So, in case if there is no bottleneck in a particular production or operational capacity, then we can say or we can identify that there will be an excess or more number of supplies of demand in a particular product or of a market situation, and accordingly, a surplus capacity of demand can be created in a certain market. And hence, we must always try to see that the identification of bottleneck is essentially important, and avoiding of the involvement of certain bottlenecks is essentially important, so as to see that how do we increase the demand for a certain product and accordingly the demand and supply is being matched and the surplus capacity brings in the revenue to the business organization. A bottleneck is usually considered as a costly affair and it is very difficult to get it because its implementation, its practices, its usage in a day-to-day concern of the organization is very important and accordingly the decision is undertaken to be in a very effective way. So there is just one solution that is available here at these stages, acquiring the more output. So these are the various steps through which we can reduce or we can plan to reduce the amount of or the number of bottlenecks in a business organization and how they can be reduced in order to see that the process or activities that have been undertaken are very effective and they are important. Avoiding the bottlenecks in manufacturing itself. So right from the manufacturing activity itself, one can try to see that how those particular bottlenecks can be received and they can be minimized. Optimizing the performance. So we should always try to increase the performance, only on which basis we can try to improvise a certain activity. And when the performance increases, so accordingly, the bottlenecks will automatically be erased, it will be removed, and there will be a streamlined and smooth free flow of activities in the business organization. Increasing the process capacity. Now, when capacity in a business organization increases, it simultaneously adds to the increase in performance, and accordingly, the quantity and quality of the products that are being manufactured also increases simultaneously. Examining the production schedules. So when we examine and when we assess and identify what are the various process schedules and the production schedules that have been undertaken, it helps to create a better organization results, and on those particular basis, the activities that have been conducted are very quite effective and fruitful. And lastly, minimizing the downtime. So when the downtime or the reduced time is been reduced, and accordingly, based on those constitutions, the bottlenecks gets automatically flowed up, and accordingly, the process or the activities that have been conducted are will streamlined and effective. Now let us understand what are the various steps to manage the bottlenecks. Number one, increasing the number of resources at the bottlenecks, always having a component to process for the bottleneck, ensuring that the bottleneck only operates on high quality components. Take a look at your production schedule, extend the period of the production is active, and lastly, keeping the downtime to a minimum. So these are the various steps or activities or the certain strategies which will help to, in a certain organization to reduce the number of bottlenecks. In case of an bottlenecks, the entire manufacturing activity or the operational activity gets impacted and it increases the cycle of the operations. Wherein case the delivery time of a certain product, the manufacturing time of a certain product increases simultaneously and it impacts the customer relationship with the businessman. And hence, for those particular consideration, we need to have a proper control on the manufacturing activity, the operational activity, the supply chain activity, the distribution chain, the delivery of the goods, services, commodities on a particular constitution, the proper watch or eye on the assembly line, a proper look on the production schedule, whether it has been not followed or not followed, what are the various changes or the deviations that have been with respect to the inventory, the material, the resources that have been handled, and so on. So accordingly, a proper active involvement of each and every member of the business organization, the shop floor level, the management concern is essentially required. And on those particular basis, we can easily and effectively manage the bottlenecks. Now let us understand how do we overcome the bottlenecks that can arise in a business organization. So in order to see that the various bottlenecks that have been arises in a business organization have been controlled, one needs to try to see that how do we control and how do we figure out those activities with respect to the increase in the supply chain. So there should be an effective and proper supply chain activity that is being conducted, and on those particular basis or activities, those activities should be controlled in a very effective manner. Analysis and interpretation of data. So certain data that has been created, a proper analysis of those particular data needs to be undertaken, and on those particular basis, a decision as to how do we control that particular data and the fruitful results can be created should be understood. Outsourcing the 3PL, that is the third party logistics. So adoption of certain policies with respect to the third party logistics should be implemented, and accordingly a reliable and experienced staff should be employed for conducting by the bottlenecks associations. Creating a solid strategy and flexible and transparent supply chain. So a profit strategy should be implemented, which can be acceptable in the short run as well as in the long run. And accordingly, one should try to see that how do we control certain activities in the short run as well as in the long run. And accordingly, the policies which are always flexible in nature, which are always transparent, should be implemented, and those particular policies can be organized and can be planned in the business organization. So to summarize, we can understand that a reproductive bottleneck only occurs only when a population size is substantially reduced. So on those particular basis, one can easily understand and identify as to how a particular activities or series of activities in business organization can occur and how do we need to control those particular activities. A reproductive activity is a bottleneck or a certain activity which may occur at a several stages or very frequently. So for those particular consideration, it is substantially required, and we need to see that how do we control and minimize those particular activities, and in the long run as well as in the short run, such type of activities or the bottlenecks do not occur. A bottleneck gets only triggered only when the various of factors as the part of an internal or external environment may occur or may not occur, and accordingly a calamity situation may arise. So depending on the extension, habitat, and the damage results that is been expected, the bottleneck either increases or the bottleneck either decreases. Now let's summarize what we have learned in this particular session. In this particular session, we have understood what do we mean by a bottleneck resource management, what are the various plannings that have been required in case of a bottleneck resource management, how do we implement the bottleneck resource management in an organization, and lastly, what is the emphasis in industry with respect to the bottleneck as a major important consideration. I hope you must have enjoyed the learning in this particular session. Thank you for your patience listening. Thank you.